just a fake silhouette, avoiding every threat. I wanna stay like a silhouette, but I can't do that. No, I can't do that. No, I can't do that.
Hey internet friends, we're taking a break from the usual documentary-style videos to chronicle the happenings of 2020 on this channel. And today I welcome you to my own backyard of Atlanta, Georgia, where just last night, after the district attorney filed felony charges against the police officers on the scene of Rayshard Brooks' fatal shooting, Atlanta officers walked off the job in protest. This left Atlanta wide open for crime, and Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms begging for police to return to work. However, curiously absent from this mass exodus was the coverage of it. After all, CNN headquarters are here in Atlanta. This place is crawling with desperate journalists looking to catch the next story, yet the mainstream media didn't report this noticeable police absence for many hours last night. And when they did, they depicted it with complete inaccuracy and total dishonesty. In other words, they behaved exactly as predicted. But alas, I'm here with the inside scoop. If you're unaware of the Rayshard Brooks incident, it comes weeks after the death of George Floyd in the protests that followed. Officers responded to a driver asleep in his vehicle in the Wendy's drive-thru. A field sobriety test was given under the suspicion of a DUI, and when Brooks resisted arrest, officers attempted to subdue him. He assaulted both officers, taking one of their tasers, and fled on foot. Running after him, Brooks is seen on camera pointing the taser back at the officer and firing it, and the officer responded by shooting and killing Brooks. Details later emerged, giving us some insight as to why Brooks might have resisted arrest. Brooks had an extensive criminal history, but he had been released from jail earlier that year, so he was on a very conditional and probationary period, and a DUI charge would have landed him back in jail to finish out his sentence. Since last Friday, the night of the incident, there have been numerous debates about the lethalness of a taser, and if the taser posed a threat to the pursuing officer, and other questions like, does a fired taser have the ability to incapacitate an individual? And would that incapacitation be a detriment or a threat to the officer in this instance? I'll leave you to debate that amongst yourselves, but in the state of Georgia, an officer is allowed to take their use of force one step above an individual who's being detained or arrested. So do with that information what you will. There's literally no way I could phrase or articulate this sequence of events that will appease everyone and offend no one, so why even bother? Let's move on.
We have decided to issue warrants in this case today.
Yesterday, on Wednesday, June 17, 2020, the Fulton County District Attorney Paul Howard Jr. charged both Atlanta officers Garrett Rolfe and Devin Bronson in the fatal shooting of Rayshard Brooks. The officer who did the trigger work is being charged with 11 charges, which include felony murder, 3 counts of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, criminal damage to property, violation of oath, and aggravated assault. I watched the press conference live with the district attorney yesterday, and he even floated the idea of the death penalty for the offending officer. This may or may not be of interest to you, depending on your interpretation of these events, but according to an article published by the Atlanta Journal-Constitution back in May of 2020, Paul Howard is not only facing an election runoff, but he's also under criminal investigation for his use of a nonprofit to funnel at least $140,000 in City of Atlanta funds to supplement his salary. And on top of that, he's been accused of sexual harassment. So, could his charges be politically motivated? The Georgia Bureau of Investigation responded to Paul Howard's charges yesterday, saying that they were unaware of the press conference or what it would entail, as the GBI had not finished their investigation of the incident. So they're implying that the investigation is still underway and Paul Howard's charges are premature. And thus, we have ourselves a good old dumpster fire here in Atlanta. And to add more kindling to this dumpster fire, Atlanta police officers walked off the job en masse last night, leaving their precincts wide open. There were reports that Mayor Lance Bottoms begged for police from surrounding counties to assist for backup, but they refused. Georgia State Patrol was the only entity responding to calls because apparently GSP cannot legally deny assistance if requested. The Atlanta Police Department released an official statement last night saying, "The department is experiencing a higher than usual number of call-outs with the incoming shift, but we have enough resources to maintain operations and remain able to respond to incidents. But that's a total cover-up. A lot of us listened to the Atlanta Police Scanner last night. I think at one point it had almost 15,000 listeners. And here's what we heard. Between 7 p.m. and 8:30 p.m., orders were given over the police scanner to cancel all calls to any physical fights in progress where weapons were not involved. Armed robberies had been holding for several hours, and all auto accidents without injury were to be handled between drivers because police were not responding. There were simply not enough police to respond. And by 8:30 p.m., there were 580 calls to the Atlanta Police Department pending. At one point, while listening to the scanner, I heard a dispatcher ask, "Is anyone out there?" After that, it was total silence. No one was out there. You could have heard it for yourself just by listening. There were also reports that 2 Atlanta police officers had remained in one Atlanta police station, but they abandoned it after securing the weapons because protesters were closing in. Now, okay, if you watched the news last night or this morning, you got the real watered-down version of these events. You probably heard that only a few officers walked off the job, that they totally had things under control, that rumors were greatly exaggerated, because there needs to be an appearance of control in the face of chaos, because the media works for the government, and because the media only wants to start fires until they're too big to put out. People will fight over these bread and circuses playing out across our screens. It will serve the purpose to divide them even further. One side will say it was a good decision for police to band together and leave the job and protest. The other side, those who've been calling to defund police, will say that Atlanta officers leaving their job last night was a dereliction of duty, that instead of reform, police would rather quit their jobs. This is a game you can't win, so I'm not gonna play. I'd say that the events of 2020 have very little to do with the police. They're just another pawn on the global chessboard. Plans of civil unrest have been on the books for a long time. Bread and circuses distract and oppress people long enough to keep them down so they won't have enough energy or organization to overthrow the controlling party. Today it's Atlanta, but tomorrow it's Nashville. The next day it's Dallas. The next day it's LA, DC, Chicago, Portland. It's all going to spread. It's all going to accelerate until the election. But let's ask ourselves the question, who benefits? Who benefits besides the politicians? Well, have you ever watched RoboCop? It deals with the concept of huge corporations trying to create crime in order to privatize the police force. In other words, corporations inciting violence so they can conduct and control police activity. How does this help corporations? It keeps law enforcement from looking into their backgrounds and activities, and therefore this eliminates the threat of arrest and promotes the ability to enforce law and order on their enemies. Take this a step further. By having the law on their side, no one is taking away the Federal Reserve. And by privatizing the police force, they just tell cops, hey, instead of the 50 grand you're making per year, come work for us and we'll pay you, 100 or 200 grand. As an added bonus, with all this chaos, it tanks real estate prices in the area and sends people scurrying out of the cities for properties to be purchased for a low price. That's my main point really, as I discuss these events taking place in my own backyard. You can call me a conspiracy theorist, a statist, a racist, a white nationalist, whatever you like really, but none of it sticks because none of it's true. Take a couple steps back and look, really look. It's not about police and it's not about race. It's not about repeating Black Lives Matter, White Lives Matter, Police Lives Matter, Asian Lives Matter, whatever. It's not about that. It's not about how loudly you can repeat it because none of us cattle matter to the human farmers. It's about this new world order they're trying to force feed us. And most importantly, it's about you and how you react. What do you think, internet friends? You know I always look forward to your comments. Thank you so much for watching, subscribing, and supporting me on Patreon. Bye.
I'm just a fake silhouette, avoiding every threat. I wanna stay